Hey there. Good morning, everyone. Clay, the drummer, the little
Not
drummer
quite,
boy,
not
the big drummer boy.
Not quite. They couldn't hear it. You didn't have to tell them.
Oh,
They
sorry.
couldn't
Clay
hear
was
it.
drumming. You guys missed it. Next
It
time.
was really impressive too.
It was very impressive.
Good morning,
Hey,
folks.
how's it going? Welcome to Bold TV. I'm Carrie Sheffield here with Clay Aiken. Don't forget to like Bold TV on Facebook and make sure that you join the conversation. We've got a lot going on, and I know you guys have very passionate feelings and thoughts about all of this because, as usual, Trump is the news gift that keeps on giving, and we have a lot of
Dumpster
stuff.
fire.
That's his words, not mine. And yeah, so.
Do you think they really thought that I spoke for you in any way? No, not at all.
I'm
Although
just saying I
say,
don't endorse them.
I must say, I mean, there's big news this week, obviously, but it's been a quieter week from the Trump administration than we have had over the past weeks, over the past month. Don't you think it's been something, one big, huge piece of news, and then, I think it effectively did what I believe he sort of wanted it to do. Change the subject from some of the scandals that that his administration has been embroiled in over the past several months. Do you think that had anything to do with why he made this big show of teasing out this announcement on Paris and announcing it?
Yeah, the way he did it was definitely like a big teaser. It was sort of like, we got a 60 minutes investigation and we're going to roll it out. Not today. We're doing it in a few days. I'm going to do it at 3 o'clock.
After the commercial.
Yes, exactly.
It's very much the reality show version of it.
He's brilliant TV. I mean, he knows TV, obviously.
He does, but what's also, it's drama, but he turned what really shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone, because he talked about pulling out of, obviously, I think people know we're talking about his withdrawal, the U.S.'s withdrawal from the Paris climate deal. He talked about withdrawing from the Paris climate deal during the campaign. I think we all expected him to do it. I don't know that we saw any reason, or I saw any reason, that he was not going to do it. But somehow he got us all to tune into this, brass band and announcement in the Rose Garden yesterday, because that's kind of what he is. He's a showman. He's P.T. Barnum more than he's anything else. Do you think the news was as disruptive as people thought it was going to be? Not the result of it, but the news itself?
Well, that was the drama, and we're going to talk more about this later in the show in terms of the staffing shakeup, but there was word on the street, and this is what I'm really interested to know, because as you said, he's a performer. Like, was he actually grappling with this issue, or has he already made up his mind before anything ever happened? Because there's the warring factions of the Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Secretary Tillerson camp, and then on the other side, the Steve Bannon, the Pruitt, the other side of the camp where people were saying, let's get out of this thing.
Yeah,
so,
it's
I don't
fascinating.
know.
It's fascinating to me, and I think the biggest question that I have post-Paris climate extraction is, how much influence does Ivanka Trump have? I think she has gone in. She told Gayle King. She's told many people that she is trying to pick her battles, and she wants to use her influence in very focused places and focused ways. And she has not been shy to say that climate change is sort of her big deal. She brought Al Gore to Trump Tower after Donald Trump won. She spoke to Leonardo DiCaprio. She's done a lot of work. She kind of rallied the business world to kind of help her get her father to not pull out of the Paris climate change. It's the one topic that she's really said she wanted to make a difference on, and yet she lost. And not only did she lose, she wasn't there yesterday. Trump made his announcement during a Jewish holiday, so she was home, not involved in not even at the White House.
Do you think he did that on purpose that way?
I don't know. I'd hope that he wouldn't have, but if he did, that's pretty awful towards his daughter, and how much influence, if any, that I believed she might have had. What does this say about how much she has?
Well, we debated this on the show, and we want to know your thoughts. And make sure, if you love our show, to share it.
Does Ivanka Trump still have any?
Yeah, what do you think? And also, what do you think about the decision overall of the Paris Accords? So my take on the Ivanka thing is, I think that this is actually good for people who are worried about nepotism. So a lot of people came in and said, we are so worried the fact that Jared Kushner has this huge portfolio of things that he's working on, and that Ivanka, his blood daughter, is going to be able to just, pull strings and get whatever she wants. That didn't happen in this case.
But it's also bad news for those people who believed that they would be a moderating force and would keep him from doing some pretty awful things. To the question of how detrimental is this for the U.S. You know, I'm in the camp that certainly believes that it's a huge mistake to pull out of the Paris climate deal. I am not necessarily in the camp that is as worried about what it does for the climate in the short term as some are, but I do think that it's irresponsible for the same reasons that Rex Tillerson. But I mean, I'm not in the Rex Tillerson camp at all, but I agree with him that one of the major reasons to have stayed in this was the importance of working together globally, you know, and that's sort of what Donald Trump ran against. And as I listened to his speech, I have to say, I don't think it had anything to do with climate change for him. I think the extraction from the deal was solely because he was able to use it to play to that base of America first. And I believed going into that speech, when we knew he was going to pull out, that his entire speech was going to be about nobody else in the world is going to tell us what to do. We're strong. We're going to run our country the way we want to run our country. And that's exactly what he did. It was one of the most dismal and cynical speeches that we've heard, certainly the most cynical and dismal that we've heard from him since his inauguration speech.
Well, I don't think it was dismal at all. I thought it was...
There's a surprise.
No, it's like, for me, it keeps getting better. I am so shocked. I was not expecting Trump to do what I was excited about, but it happened. So I have an op-ed on Bold.Global right now about my take on pulling out.
Well, tell us now. People will go and read it.
Well, Zach actually from Team Bold, he made this point where he was saying that, you know, this thing didn't have any teeth. There was no legal enforcement mechanism. So I think you're right, Clay, in the sense that this was not something... No, Zach's promoted.
He didn't.
No, that this didn't have any legal teeth. So in terms of, you know, actual structural changes to what we were going to do, it was more kind of a gentleman or gentlewoman's agreement. So it had to do more with, you know, just rescinding from an Obama era sort of agreement. I made the point in my op-ed that any sort of treaty-like, or if it smells like a duck, it quacks like a duck, whatever that analogy goes.
It quacks like a duck. Yes, definitely. If it does that, we should be afraid of it.
If it walks like a duck, whatever. It's a treaty, and the treaty should go to the Senate. And you know, the Senate is the one.
But you did just admit that it didn't have teeth, so therefore it wasn't a treaty. So it didn't walk like a duck or quack like a duck because it wasn't a treaty. And I mean, we were able to pull out of it because there was not a treaty. But to your point about it being a gentleman's agreement, I think that is why Rex Tillerson and many people believe it was more important to stay in it, because this was, you know, we have now joined the ranks of, Nicaragua and Syria, which I believe are the only two other countries that did not, in the world, that did not sign on to this.
I don't buy that argument because
don't buy it because...
No, because during World War II, we were the only ones that were standing up against the Nazis successfully. So, you know what?
And that is certainly a great comparison.
No, it is in the sense that it doesn't matter if you are correct. It doesn't matter who's wrong. It matters that you're standing up for what you believe is right.
So Donald Trump suggested that he, and you know, admittedly, France, Italy, and Germany, I believe, have already come out and said we're not doing this, so it doesn't matter. But Donald Trump suggested that we were leaving the Paris climate deal, but we might go back into it if we renegotiate a better deal. What would be a better deal, Carrie?
Well, for example, China and India, who are the worst, polluters right now in terms of the growth in pollution, the accord did not require any retractive improvement. It was about reducing future emissions, whereas the U.S. would have had to retroactively reduce emissions. That double standard, I think, was a big problem, especially given what Trump was saying on the campaign trail about, you know, China is eating our lunch when it comes to trade. So this was another example of China reasserting itself in a way that put the U.S. at a disadvantage. So if we can restructure the Paris Accord, then that would make sense, I think.
Well, listen, I don't know that people would disagree that it would be a wonderful situation if we could get China and India to regressively reduce their emissions. But there is an argument. I think there's always in politics this argument about what's more important, getting exactly what you want or making progress that you wouldn't make otherwise. And I think that's a situation that they were in 2015 in Paris, which was, if we want to get China and India to the table, we have to do it on terms that we can get them to the table on. And asking them to do the things that America was doing was simply not going to get them to the table. And it's better to take, many people believe it's better to take a step forward than no step forward at all. And America was in a position because A, we're capable of it, B, we have been in the past and are slowly not being now the moral leader of the world. And we knew that we were in a position to make changes that we knew needed to be made anyway. I mean, these are not things that, it wasn't a treaty. We weren't bound to it. It was a gentleman's agreement, as you said. But they were things that we needed to do anyway. They were emissions that we needed to reduce anyway. If we could make agreement to do something that we already knew we needed to do, and in return get some sort of agreement from China and India, then we should do that. But peer pressure is really what kind of drives everything. Do you recycle at your house?
Well, in New York, you have to. It's the law.
It is the law, but it's not necessarily enforced. But most
I
people
recycle. Yes.
But for years it wasn't, and most people recycled because if you didn't, and your neighbors did, and if they found out you didn't, you just peer pressure has drives a lot of the world. And
FYI, I talked to my friend who helped Al Gore get his Nobel Science Prize. He's a Harvard professor of climate science, and he said that recycling is basically a wash because it takes a lot of energy to actually recycle the material and put it to something else.
But yet we still do it.
It's kind of one of these like psychological, like make you feel good.
You make my point.
And I think
but you make my point because I don't disagree that it sort of is a wash, but we still do it because everybody else does it, and we look like douches if we don't.
No, because just because it makes you feel good doesn't mean it's going to have an actual impact. And I think, Clay, that you rightfully conceded that point, which is that, MIT did a study that said if every single climate, a participant in this agreement did everything to the full extent, it still would have a very negligible impact on actual climate emissions, just because of the growth in the economy. So I think the solution here is really got to be an economic one in terms of we have to stop, and I had a debate with somebody from Vice about this yesterday, and I think we both agreed, let's stop subsidizing oil companies. I think it makes no sense that we're subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. Like, we have to let these industries compete on their own. Same thing as we have to let the clean energy jobs compete on their own. So
Judy Anderson on Facebook says, but doesn't the U.S. want to be a leader setting an example?
Well, Judy, we are. I mean, our emissions have dropped down by 12.6% since 2006.
So why not use that? And that's great. So why not use that as a continued carrot to make sure that China and India continue to fulfill their promises? Whether they have to retroactively reduce emissions or not, they have committed to reducing emissions going forward. If the U.S. pulls out and China pulls out, yes, you can make an argument that the effect might be negligible. Yes, it might be only a degree or two over the next several years. But if they don't reduce those emissions, then we're in a much worse shape than we would have been in. And I think that, I guess, again, it's one of those situations where, is it the best deal possible? Yes, but a deal is better than no deal at all. And this is not something, in my opinion and many people's opinion, that is responsible to pull out of because, A, it's a deal that's better than nothing, and B, we now have said essentially to the rest of the world.
Well, it's important to note that the reason why we had the drop in our emissions was because of shale, was because of natural gas, was because of this boom in the economic side of things
fossil fuels.
that made it, well, these were fuels that were cleaner. And to your point, something in between is better than nothing. So it's better to go
arguably cleaner.
If we're moving from coal to natural gas, this is better for the environment. Like, let's do that. That's the innovative way to do things. And then let's also make sure that we're not subsidizing fossil fuels. Let's have a level playing field for solar and cleaner energy to make sure that it's competing in a natural economic way. And then everybody wins. Because honestly, it is an economic incentive for car companies, for example. A consumer wants to have a more efficient tank of gas. If I can go 40 miles versus 80 miles, I'm going to want to get the car that has 80 miles. Of course, that's a no-brainer.
I don't know that is necessarily the issue, because you're dead right about that. The market does improve. The market does help car companies be incentivized to create cars that are more fuel efficient. Electric cars have been on an upswing specifically because of that. But the market doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how companies pollute or use, how they make those cars. Yes, they're making fuel efficient cars, but are they using more fossil fuels to do so? Are they emitting more carbon to do so? And the market has very little control over that. And I think that's something that we must address. Now, this deal that we've pulled out of, actually, we haven't pulled out. We didn't pull out of it yesterday. You have to give a year's notice to pull out of it. You have to. There's 4 years. So as a matter of fact, it doesn't actually officially end until the day after the next presidential election in 2020. it is certainly, I believe, worthy of being a campaign issue next time around, because the next president who goes into office has the ability to rejoin the climate deal, because I honestly don't believe there will be any renegotiation whatsoever.
No, I don't think the Senate's going to pick this up, whether they consider it a treaty or not. Let's pull in a few comments here. Sabrina Adams says, remember, we're not saving the planet. It will survive in one form or another. We are trying to save ourselves and our place on Earth. And Paulette Carletta says, recycling reduces the size of our landfills. And she also says it's not just about America, it's about our world. So, and then Mickey Alessi says, why natural gas? Why not go straight to the right thing, i.e. start putting the planet first? I think that, again, the problem with that is that it's not there. It's not cost effective.
Well, who was it?
So
I think Emmanuel Macron said, I think it was him, who said, in his statement after the president pulled out of this agreement,
it was trolling.
Why can I not?
He was basically said, "Make the world great again."
Let's make the
make Earth again.
Make the world
Make
great
the
again,
planet.
which I thought was sort of brilliant. I can't think of the word that I wanted to use.
It was good trolling.
He restated the commitment of France and the rest of the world to it, and so mad props to Macron. He shouldn't have shook his hand so damn hard. Donald Trump. He's you now. There's a lot of other stuff that happened this week.
I watched the speech. Oh yeah, no, that's well. I watched the Macron speech as well. And I just thought, you know what?
You just watched it because you think he's cute. Don't lie.
Okay, he is cute. Also, I had a technical question because he said our children, and I think his wife is 60 years old. Does he have kids? Because he's only 39.
I don't know.
That's in a sidebar. But anyway, when I
have
heard
kids,
him,
so anyone can have.
Sure, true.
If I can do
That's
it,
true.
anyone can do it.
Yes.
So what else happened this week? We had, Donald Trump came back from his from his trip overseas.
Yep, NATO.
They say it was the most successful trip in history.
Well, it was the most historic in terms of the fact that a U.S. president flew from Saudi Arabia to Jerusalem. That never happens, and you can't even get a commercial flight that way.
Right.
That was innovative, and I thought it was a statement to say we're going to try something different. But at the same time, this week, the president said we are not going to officially recognize the embassy in Jerusalem. So keeping with precedents in that way, but trying to move things differently.
Why do you think he did that? Because that was certainly a campaign promise. Well, many have made it.
Yeah,
but
a lot
not
of presidents have made that promise.
What happens when you become president? Obviously, you get intel. I would argue that Trump may have gotten a lot of intel and just not cared about it. But there what is the intel that a president elect or a new president is given that changes that so consistently? Do not move the embassy to Jerusalem. What do they learn? What do you think?
Well, I think part of what Trump learned was that by going to Saudi Arabia and getting those Saudi allies, he also got a lot of Gulf country allies that were at the conference there in Saudi Arabia, and the sense is that if he were to do that in terms of move the embassy to, recognize the capital as Jerusalem, this would really annoy and set off a trigger domino effect to a lot of other countries, not just on that particular conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that a lot of Arab countries, they really take it personal. It's like a proxy kind of conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So it's a much broader issue.
But do you think that's something that I think many people kind of already get. Do you think there's another piece of information, fact or alternative fact, that the president gets that makes it more real to them when they get into office? Because I don't think that, well, Trump may not have known it beforehand, but I don't think most people don't understand the sensitivity of the issue prior to making a promise like that. But then when they get into office, they go, well, okay, maybe I'm not going to do that.
Well, I think especially because Trump is trying to reassert the Sunni alliance, whereas Obama was more focused on the Shiite with the Iranians and Persian influence. So I think if he was trying to get influence among the Sunnis by moving the embassy that way, that really would not work well. That was, I think, part of the triangulation. But also, I think, going there, like I spent some time there. I was a journalist in Jerusalem. When you physically go there and you just get the sense of history, I mean, it's a place that is holy to all three major world religions, Christians as well. So you're really not just getting into the politics of it, you're getting into religion and culture. I mean, it's a hornet's nest if you're going to step into that. I mean, of any people who would step into it, it would be Trump, but even him.
He might get stung.
You don't want to get struck down, I guess.
What was fascinating to me, well, it's not just fascinating to me. because it happens all the time. But upon his return, obviously Sean Spicer gave all these superlatives, how it's the most historic trip in the world, history. It was the most successful trip in history. Arguably, it was. You certainly make a point that there was a historic portion of it. The flight did make a statement and made a change, but it wasn't necessarily more historic. But if you listen to the news on one channel, you hear people talking about how he embarrassed the country, America. They're talking about how he elbowed the Montenegrin president, how the Pope looked completely miserable, and then you look on another channel, we won't say which one, and of course they're talking about how it was historic. So there is obviously a continued media bias. So we're going to